The following video has met only the highest standards of mediocrity and has earned the Manashadow seal of approval.
Alright gang, welcome back to the top 10 SNES games. Let's lay down those disclaimers one more time. First off, this list is subjective. Just because one game is higher on the list than another game doesn't mean I think that it's technically more difficult or more of a classic or a better game in general. It just means that that's the game that I liked more or played more or enjoyed more as a kid. Secondly, this list wasn't easy. Look, how do you quantify nostalgia? I don't know. You don't know either. Shut up. Third, and finally, I recorded all this stuff without realizing that my camera was on, so we're all gonna have to deal with the serval either in the upper left or the bottom right corner. So, link to the top 20, 20 through 11 should be in the description below. Let's get down to it, guys. Top 10. Number 10, Donkey Kong Country. I have a complicated relationship with this game. I grew up hating Donkey Kong as a character, but I think that's just because the game was so damn challenging for me as a kid. I wasn't too great at it, but these early 3D visuals were flooring then and still distinctive to this day. It's like the video game equivalent to die-cast metal toys. It's a lost art that just isn't practiced anymore. Rare's earlier days were in the middle of a farmland on England, Rare being the developer of this game. When they wanted a barrel texture to stretch over their wireframe, they'd scan an image of a rusty old garden trowel. The trees were made by scanning in leaves from the trees. There's always been something about this kind of early 3D that's really been able to transport me to another world. Myst was like that too. You could really suspend your disbelief and get lost in a computer-generated world. My wife and I actually played through this game together not too long ago, and it was a great experience to share that with somebody. This game is replete with examples of people doing innovative things to create either the visuals or the sound or the music. My god, the music. Aquatic Ambiance might go down as one of the emotionally moving and just world-enriching pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. I mean, I literally have that on a CD and I listen to it in my car all the time. I mean, that's just how far-reaching and broad spectrum that song is for me. And a lot of different songs from Donkey Kong Country are like that. Anytime I want to escape to another world, Donkey Kong Country is my 16-bit go-to. Number 9, Magic Sword. I had this game as a kid, and although I didn't know this at the time, this is actually an arcade port. I feel like this was a sleeper hit because anyone that I talk to who knows about the game is really favorable towards it. This game was really easy to pick up and play due to its action arcade style. Part of what enamored me as a kid was its variety. Not in the weapons you get, but in the allies you get. You get 3 types of keys throughout the game in plentiful qualities, and these can be used to unlock cells. Sometimes those cells contain enemies or fairies that give you health items, but more often than not they contain allies that will join you if you walk into them. They all have different attack weapons and styles. The Amazon shoots very fast, but doesn't have a whole lot of power. The Large Man is really slow, but has a very strong axe with minimal reach. The Knight has a really strong lance and a fairly good range, and he's pretty well balanced overall. The Mage fires a ring of magic balls and has the strongest attack, but it works really slowly. Interestingly enough, your allies have their own health and their own levels. You can affect these by collecting different items and hearts and things like that, and as your ally increases in level, their attack changes and becomes more powerful. And these graphical changes that they actually apply to your allies' weapons really give you a sense of being able to see the progression that you're making, and it keeps the game interesting. It leaves you wondering, what does the Knight's Spear look like when he's level 4 versus level 2? It adds replayability without punishing the player for not replaying it. One time my cousin James was over, I got all the way to the final boss, and just as I was about to beat him, I died. Ran into the living room, threw myself on the couch and cried. James was a real one though. He encouraged me about how far I got, and eventually I went back and I did beat it. This was one of my real first SNES victories. It was easy to get into, easy to put down, and had great replayability. Number 8. King of Dragons. I've heard that King of Dragons was an SNES response to an arcade game, specifically Dungeons & Dragons Tower of Doom. But that's not actually true. If you're ever watching this on YouTube and you hear somebody say that, that's not true. King of Dragons was released in 1991, which was actually the year that the SNES was released in North America. The Tower of Doom hit the arcades about 2 years later in 1993. Chronology aside, there's a very good reason that this game is in my top 10. It's fun as hell. First off, you get the choice of 5 characters, all of whom have their own visual aesthetic and playstyle. Their attack ranges, speeds, magic strength, attack strength, jump height, and speed, it all varies from character to character. As your character defeats enemies, they gain levels, which usually means more hit points. Each character also has 2 items that they carry, and as you progress, you get better versions of those items. I prefer either the cleric or the wizard. The cleric gets new shields and new maces or hammers, and the wizard gets better staves and rings for defense. I actually didn't know you could set the shield button to a manual button press until I played it again for the purposes of creating this list. That helped a lot. Blocking in this game is pretty OP and it's fantastic. Everyone that makes one of these lists has a game where they're like, I played this to get footage for it and I couldn't put it down. I'm a YouTube. Well, that's what this game was for me. I didn't record an hour of footage for a 10-minute bit. You recorded an hour of footage for a 10-minute. Number 7. Super Mario RPG. This is another gem that my cousin Jim had, and I spent more than one sleepover watching him play it. Not that doing so bothered me, it didn't. We didn't have YouTube and Let's Plays back then, and God, I sound like somebody's dad. I guess I technically am somebody's dad. So the best you had was watching a friend play a game, especially when they were better at it than you were. I mentioned in my last video that I was kind of attention deficit, and that wasn't a joke, I was diagnosed. That being the case, I just didn't have the patience to appreciate a turn-based RPG. Like Super Metroid, I'm actually returning to this one with my SNES Classic, but even as an ADHD crackhead child, I was intrigued by this game. The early 3D graphics reminded me of Donkey Kong Country, but with so much more content. I think it blew everybody's mind to see Mario and friends in such a different role, a different adventure, a different world. I loved Mario Bros. 3 with being able to carry and use items as you saw fit, and this was a fantastic successor. The timed attack system was a revolutionary way to incentivize you to stay involved in the battle. Additionally, many of the visuals used for the backgrounds and sprites were also used for the battle effects, making those effects eye-catching and engaging. The game has plenty of cameos and references to other older Nintendo games as well, and it's interesting to think that something like a Link reference would have been nostalgic back then, even in 1996. With every enemy as varied and memorable as the protagonists, this game keeps your interest even while grinding levels. I remember being on the phone with my cousin Jim as he removed the plastic wrap from his copy, saying that he was the luckiest boy in the world. And when I went to Japan, I actually managed to get him an in-box copy of this game for the Super Famicom for only about 1,600 yen, or about 15 bucks. I feel like I'll be coming back to this one to slowly finish it for quite some time. Number 6. Star Fox. Yet another game I still physically have for the SNES, Star Fox was and still is a legend. The primary FX chip-containing game to rise to fame, this title took shoot-'em-ups to a whole new level. With different paths to choose from, music that rivaled the already groundbreaking visuals, and secrets I'm just now finding out about, Star Fox is one for the history books. This was always one of my go-tos when I just wanted to zip through a game and shoot stuff. But it was more than that. It was probably the only shoot-'em-up, third-person or otherwise, that I ever really had any interest in playing, except, of course, for Star Fox 64. The game was constantly fresh, flying around on planets, in asteroid belts, nebulas, and the enemies were weird enough to be interesting, but bland and untextured enough to leave something to the imagination. They took a bunch of gray and red flashing polygons and made an unforgettable space ballad out of it, for God's sake. The black hole level was something I knew about, I think from Nintendo Power. I can honestly say the first time I saw this asteroid with the creepy face, I was pretty freaked out. Plus, the background music and the background itself are trippy as hell. The secret I didn't really get until recently was the out-of-this-dimension secret world. Crashing into this giant bird sends you into what I can only sanely describe as a hellscape. Crashing into it, I think, back in 1990, whenever I played this, probably would have also sent me into a panic attack, because it was scary as hell. The music is a distorted combination of classical pieces and is downright unsettling. Yeah, I can honestly say that if I had discovered this as a kid, it would have scared the hell out of me. Regardless, this game will always have a special place in my mind and will never be considered anything other than the classic that it is. Number 5. Mario Kart. Okay, look, I guess I lied. Mario Kart is also a racing game and thus is a sports game. But this one was ballin', son! Now, I'm going to be real for a moment. A lot of people have a serious problem with rubber band racers. If you're unfamiliar with that term, think about Mario Kart, which is essentially the game that started this crap. If you're ahead, you get the weakest, crappiest, shittest, crappest items that the game has to offer you in order to keep you from getting farther ahead. And if you're lagging behind, the game arms you to the teeth with more weaponry than the modern American army to help you catch up. The basic idea is that you're tied to the pack with, quote, rubber bands. Go too far and the game will essentially snap you back. Get too far behind and it'll snap you up front. First off, I lapped plenty of people while I was playing this game, so the rubber banding wasn't too bad, not on the 50cc setting, or the easy setting anyway. Secondly, there was more to the game than that. The cups were sets of tracks that had eye-popping colors and engaging environmental hazards for the time. The items that you could get, you had to really know how to make use of them in order for them to be most effective, adding kind of a layer of strategy to the game. Different racers had different weights, top speeds, and accelerations, meaning that you played differently with different characters. The game had race, time trial, and battle modes, so that there was always something for everyone of every aggression level. And then there was our game. My cousin Jim and I like to call it Dodge the Crazy Maniacs Driving on the Wrong Side of the Road. If you press all 4 face buttons at the character select screen, you can shrink them down. This means that if a strong crosswind hits you, it'll flatten your ass out. Combine this with driving in the wrong direction, and you get trying not to get flattened by people driving in the opposite direction. We would laugh over this crap for hours. We also had special curses. We would wave our controllers around in a circle and chant, "You will lose, you will lose, you will lose. You'll get plowed, you'll get plowed, you'll get plowed." Look, we were what, 8? It was funny. To this day, I can remember the code to unlock the special cup for time trials just from muscle memory alone. There are too many multiplayer memories to count with this one, and it is just as special to me as everyone I've ever played it with. Number 4. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. What does one say about A Link to the Past? This game has been analyzed to death on the internet, and some will defend it to their dying breath, while others might admit that it's a good game, but it didn't really do anything groundbreaking with the franchise. So, in light of this, I'll just try to tell you what this game means to me, and why it's number 4 on my list. I want to start by saying this game isn't the one that made me fall in love with The Legend of Zelda. That would be the original Legend of Zelda for the NES, which I still have. I can actually remember a freeze frame in my mind of the first time I ever saw that game. The life meter, the different items with different uses and unique pixel art, the clean, crisp aesthetic. The world seemed so vast and full of secrets and riches. There's so much to discover. I think it was the same thing that drew me into A Link to the Past. I like games with a lot of variety, I always have, and A Link to the Past had that in spades. All the bosses were different and usually beaten in a different way. The dungeons had treasures that were able to be put to an actual use, too. There was never getting something just for the sake of getting it. It would actually enable you to go somewhere you couldn't before, or to do something you weren't able to do previously. A lot of people feel that A Link to the Past was too much more hand-holdy than the NES original, but I got stuck plenty of times, and I'm sure I had to consult my Nintendo Power magazines or my cousin Jim for hints along the way. Maybe that's because I was young, maybe that's because I had ADHD, I don't know. But either way, I never saw the game as a direction-following quest. If anything, I enjoyed having more direction. Maybe that's one reason I liked it so much and put it so much higher on my list than Super Metroid. Regardless, one of the other reasons I like this game so much, outside of the epic music and beautiful, clean pixel art, is that it was a solid, single-player experience. One that I enjoyed watching as much as playing. There's just something to be said about a good, double-digit hour single-player experience that I was really concerned we were in danger of losing throughout the early 2010s, late 2000s. For me, this game put the action in action-adventure, and is nearly the definition of such. And the fact that you could actually save your game was pretty ballin'. Number 3. Super Mario World. I'd be pretty surprised, honestly, if an SNES owner didn't have Super Mario World in their top 5, let alone their top 10. This game set the bar for adventure platformer. Think about it. Items, tight controls, a fun and interesting world, themed and unique subsections of that world, multiplayer co-op, challenging yet fair gameplay, tons and tons of secrets, replayability because you can find all the switches and then go back and play levels differently and get a different path. Once Super Mario World hit the scene, it became the standard by which all other platformers were judged, and whether it's fair or not, sometimes are still judged to this day. Some might argue that this is because it came first, and there might be some legitimacy to that, but you can't deny that few games have all the love and care pumped into them that Super Mario World did. Plenty of consoles that were technically more advanced than the Super Nintendo had launch titles that weren't crafted well, didn't properly show off what that console was capable of, or just flat out sucked. Super Mario World didn't just hit the scene first, it properly heralded the coming of the next era of gaming. It showed us the breadth of adventure we could have, and it did it with a range of emotions. We were creeped out at the ghost houses. We were confused at the Forest of Illusion. We were hungry the whole damn time because everything was about food, but weirdly charmed by that too. I don't really want to talk about it. There is a reason why Super Mario World is loved by so many people, and I am no exception to that. This game was a huge transition for gaming and a huge horizon for our childhoods that we will never forget cresting. And when it comes to platform adventure games, there's only one game that improved upon that formula, particularly on the SNES. Number 2. Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. I'd venture to say that Yoshi's Island is as long as Super Mario World, but doesn't feel that way because of all the nuance that is jam-packed into every level. The levels weren't just reskinned from one another. They introduced a new enemy, a new mechanic, a new feel, nearly every level. They were even cleverly titled with a little quip, each individual one. Although you had items you could save and use for later at any time, like the fire, ice, and normal watermelons, your character's basic abilities never changed, but how you used those abilities changed frequently. Sure, you threw eggs, but you had quick shots, bank shots, shots with different colored eggs producing different rewards. I didn't even know that was a thing until 2019. You would use each of your skills in a different way each time you fought one of the two lovable and creative bosses that they wove into each world. Even your conditions for losing a life in this game were creative. I mean, sure, the noise that Mario makes is nails on the chalkboard of your soul, but it's supposed to be. He's a baby in danger, for God's sake. Hell, half the time you don't die. You failed to protect your precious cargo. You allowed a baby to fall into the hands of an evil magician. Sure, Yoshi, you're alive, but why? See those question mark squares? I always assumed those would unlock if you got 100% scores on all the levels, and I was right, they do, but I've never done it. Years later, and there is still more to this game that I've never seen. But the beauty is that I didn't have to get those goodies to feel like I enjoyed or beat this game. It stands on its own without demanding that you be a perfectionist, yet has a reward for those who are. The game is challenging without being cheap, most of the time, and gives enough opportunity for extra lives via sweet bonus games that are fun to play that you rarely feel in danger of really losing or getting a game over. I'll never forget the day I beat this game. I was so proud of myself, and I don't think I need to tell you how intense the final battle is if you've played or seen this game be played. But here's a fun fact. Gigantic things that fill the screen or the sky terrified the crap out of me as a kid. To a mild extent, they still do. So I'm surprised I wasn't able to hear my own butthole pucker when Baby Bowser's enormous visage and angry white eyes started slowly bearing down on me in the final battle. But I managed to push through that and beat him back down to size. This game, for me, is simply the epitome of platformer. I'm also pretty sure this is the first licensed Nintendo game to have drug use in it. Look at that. You try to tell me Yoshi ain't fucked up. Number 1. Secret of Mana, also known as Seiken Densetsu 2. Ever have that moment in your life where you eat a certain food, or watch a certain kind of movie, or read a certain kind of book, or play a certain kind of video game, and it irrevocably changed your tastes and preferences forever? That was Secret of Mana for me. I loved all the different armor and weapons and stats and level ups that you got in RPGs, but everything was so slow and boring that I could never really get into them. One weekend I rented Secret of Mana, and a whole new world instantly opened up to me. It was the first time I ever experienced what is now commonly referred to as an action RPG. It was the first time lots of people experienced an action RPG, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's considered a classic today. I remember sitting cross-legged on a dresser with a really old TV, the kind with a knob that you have to pull out to turn the TV on, and playing this game before school. It had everything I wanted, all the weapons and armor, and had their own pixel art in the menus, even if your character sprite didn't change when you had them equipped. They all had different play styles, and the magic effects were super fun to watch and distinct from one another. Your characters, weapons, and magic could level up and become stronger. I could go on for quite some time, but let's focus in. Hiroki Kikuta wrote a score for this game that transcends time for me. It might be my favorite soundtrack of all time. That is not a joke or an over-exaggeration. I actually went to a small cafe or bar in Shinjuku, Tokyo, outside Square Enix headquarters, called Artnia, and it has drinks and snacks modeled after different Square Enix games, notably Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior at the time we went. While I was there, I actually bought the arranged soundtrack to Secret of Mana. That was a great day with a great souvenir, and the music from that CD is actually what you're listening to in the background right now. I also managed to pick up an in-box copy of the Japanese version of the game while I was in Japan. The storyline wasn't the deepest thing in the world, but it was certainly interesting. As a human empire harvests the world's energy, mana, it begins to build a gigantic flying fortress, the Mana Fortress, in order to take over the world. Well, the Earth itself, pissed at that kind of thing happen, summons a massive creature known as a Mana Beast to essentially decimate the entirety of humanity. And the craziest thing is that this has all happened before, and a hero wielding the Mana Sword defeated the Mana Beast and saved everybody else, yada yada yada. Now, spoilers ahead. The size of the world feels huge for an SNES game because you're actually able to ride around on a four-winged feathered dragon. And towards the end of the game, the Mana Fortress is rebuilt and the skies get kind of scary. So, you remember how I said that I don't like gigantic things that fill up the whole screen and it kind of makes me poop myself? These skies always made me feel like something enormous was going to engulf them and give me a coronary. But something close to that does go down. The world certainly does summon the Mana Beast, and it's the final boss. This vast horror is here to destroy all of humanity, and the worst part is, we deserved it. This thing looked terribly evil, but it was the Earth's way of defending itself. Though it wasn't just defense, it was retribution. Yeah, this final boss messed with my head a lot, and sometimes when I play this game and I get to this point, it still actually scares me a little bit. It's so big. I'm struggling to be concise and fluid with what I want to say about this game, because there's just so much I know I'll end up leaving out. The game terrified me, mesmerized me, inspired me, and helped forever define what I personally enjoy in video games. This will forever be my all-time #1 SNES game. Hey guys, thanks for letting me talk at you and sharing some of my memories, my nostalgia with me. I'm so happy I actually got this top 20 done. It's been something I've been needing to do for a really long time. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope some of my recommendations for the top games struck a chord with you, either a positive one or a negative one. Either way, leave a comment down below. And I don't know, man, if you ever thought about doing this yourself, you should. It's a lot of fun, and I would love to see any content you guys create. Leave a comment with a link if you do. Thanks.